when I talk about bone crossing strength, I mean, like you put carry a yoke onto your shoulder and everything, and you feel it all the way into your femur and things like this. The massive hormonal response from your body, from your bones, is going to dictate how far your sympathetic system will go, how much of a fight you will have.
That was Julien Pineau, and you're listening to the Just Fly Performance Podcast. Today's podcast is sponsored by Gym Studio. Gym Studio is a frictionless gym and studio management software. It can effortlessly manage memberships, schedule classes, track attendance, and even automate billing. To check out what Gym Studio can do for you, head to gymstudio.com and set up your free 14-day trial in less than 5 minutes. Welcome to another episode of the podcast, and thanks for tuning in. I'm excited to have Julien Pineau back on the show this week. Julien is a brilliant coach and founder of Strongfit. He's been working with a wide variety of athletes since 1993, and he has not only a tremendous eye for human movement and exercise methods, but he also has a deep knowledge of the interactive systems of the body and how they work together in the total training process. On the episode today, Julien will talk about many facets of instinctive training, loading the bones, engaging the myotomes or the sensory aspects of our hands and feet, the fight in carrying a sandbag. This episode is all about how we train as human beings and how it relates to the intelligence of the body, as well as our environment and our external world. It's awesome talking to Julien. I love this episode. Excited to get it going for y'all. So let's get to episode 436 here with Julien Pineau. Julien, it's awesome to have you back on the show. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, every time I see like the jungle in the background of your studio. I mean, you were just saying you live in like an island in Brazil. It has to be amazing with like the sandbags too. And I've been using a lot of sandbags myself. I think of like more of a primal, I'm making like air quotes, like a primal way to train. There has to be so many possibilities there versus like, all right, you're in the city, you go to a gym. You know what I'm saying? I'm sure there's a lot of interesting pieces there.
I have that back room over there is for the sandbag. So we have a room just for that. Yeah. So we have all the different weights and stuff. I mostly train with sandbags.
Yeah. Do you, how did your training, I know you talked about like when you were younger, the different sports you did. How did you, and maybe you told this story before, I know we talked a lot about just sandbag squats last time, but how did your journey of like strongman, barbells, dumbbells, like when did you get into sandbags? What led you there? And it sounds like, yeah, that's most of your training now.
Yeah. So I've done many different sports, from a young age. I've always been into fitness. And then in 2003, I moved to Brazil to do jiu-jitsu and MMA. And I'm at Bahag races, so in Bahia at Tijuca in Rio de Janeiro. And there's a conditioning coach. He's from Cuba, and he's going to bring us the Cuban wrestling conditioning system, which is hell on earth, honestly. And so on Monday morning, we go on the beach, and then you grab your partner, put him on your shoulder, and start squatting. And then you just carrying him around. And so we did 3 rounds of 9 to 12 exercises for about 15 reps, back and forth, with a lot of sprints, where the guy drags you. So early CrossFit workout, actually, there's an entire thing about Greg Glassman. He lived a few doors from a guy who wrote the was Encyclopedia of Wrestling Conditioning, I think, an American, John Jesse, I think was his name, if I'm not mistaken. I thought his name, so it might not be that. But anyway, a very famous strength and conditioning book about conditioning, which laid honestly is the foundation of CrossFit, one way or another, right? Anyway, so I trained with that guy, and the training was so bad. It was so hard. Like I couldn't sleep on Sunday night. It was just, the 3 rounds were the toughest things I've ever done. Because by the way, when the guy takes you on the shoulder and he squats, you're not breathing because he's like, digging in your ribs. So you're never really resting, like kind of, but not really. And so the conditioning was absurd. It was just once a week, Monday morning, but it took me a week to recover every time. I mean, but the 2 months in, 3 months in, it's the best shape I've ever been in. And he just did things, a certain type of strength for grappling. It was by far the best thing I'd ever done. I'd lifted weights before because I'm 23. So I'd, been doing like the typical weight training in the global gym for 5 years and everything. And in a few months, this changes my mindset toward training completely. That it's not like isolation work is, sorry to say, but mainly bullshit in comparison to what you get. I know now why, but back then I was like, it was just a different type of training. I'm not understanding. I just know it works. And so I leave Brazil, I come back to the US, and no one wants to train with me like that. So I was like, all right, so if I want to do it, I'm going to have to figure out a way to do it myself. And so I was like, all right, so I'm going to try sandbags. That sounds like a good way of doing it. At the time, there's only one company that makes sandbag. It's called Iron Mind, and they are like just canvas bags, and then they rip. There's only two sizes, 100 pounds or 200 pounds. I can't go. I'm destroying them. I'm spending more money on duct tape than I am on sandbags. I'm getting pissed. So at some point, I'm like, all right, fuck it. I'll do it myself. And so I find a professional seamstress, and then I got her to make me sandbags so I could train that MMA wrestling conditioning way with the sandbags. And so that's basically what started the whole thing. I just wanted to go back to that type of training, and no one would do it with me.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned the wrestling conditioning encyclopedia, and I'm trying to think. I know Dan John has talked about some like old, like from the 70s, 1970s wrestling conditioning. Like maybe that's it. And he's like, everything is in there. Like you think something's new, and then you go back and look at that book, and something related to that was already there.
Oh, at the time, like when you wrote that, like if you were to read it, it's a goldmine of information. And he's talking about, clean and jerk for 30 reps. So, Grace in CrossFit, right? Clean and jerk for 30 reps. Well, actually, the strongman in the 19th century talked about it. Like the German dude, like he was the strongest man in the world at the time. He's only 200 pounds. He's also a wrestler. As usual, I saw his name escapes me, but he's very famous. He's the main guy, not Arthur Saxon, but the other guy. And he talks about being able to do a clean and press for 30 reps because of strength, endurance, and everything. So all that conditioning stuff is a wrestling thing. All the strongmen back then were wrestlers. Most of them were wrestlers because he was seen as a symbiotic thing between strongman and wrestling. And back then, it was seen as the best way to get strong. For them, strength had to be like, it was less one rep max, more like being able to move with stuff, obviously lifting very heavy things as challenges. But they train a lot of strength endurance under very awkward movements.
Yeah, there's something too about when you are doing strength endurance, it being like an awkward thing, there's something like mentally to manage. Like if you're doing 30 reps and you're trying to like figure it out while you're doing it, there's something than just purely digging in and grinding. I think that's, I don't know, like more layers of the mind, if that makes sense.
No, I think it goes deeper than that, honestly. I don't think it's the mind. And we're going to talk about this, right? But if you look at the foundation of anxiety and everything as a driver, there is a deeper driver. There is no deeper driver than frustration. If you see there is nothing that will set objectives over long term, right? That frustration starts war, starts men from chasing girls, any driver starts with frustration. I think frustration is the call to action that is the most rooted on a physiological level. Like we can, you look at stress hormones, they affect on the body and everything, but not in a negative way.
Yeah.
I mean, in a positive way. Anything that drives you to action, that is what will make you do stuff, is a positive, not a negative, right? The problem is we have turned it into a negative, and we can go deeper into this, but I think anxiety is just a chronic version of frustration, basically. It's a frustration lower to the point where it's in the background and it stays there, but it doesn't do anything outside making you feel like shit. So, but it's because frustration would be more like of an acute thing and anxiety a chronic thing. But anyway, if you see that way of training, it's extremely frustrating because you have to grab it. Your hands are burning. Like the balancing is hard. Every single rep is different. There is nothing comfortable about it. You are never in full flow. You're never in control. It hurts everywhere. Every muscle is working. You cannot not engage your core. You don't get to do what you want with a sandbag. You get to do what the sandbag is telling you to do. But that was the point with wrestling. It's like you don't stop the fight when you're tired. You stop the fight when the gorilla is tired.
Yeah.
That's just welcome to life, right? It's 7 times down, 8 times up. It's not about falling less. It's about getting back up more. You know what I mean? But if you see the life we live now, is they inventing so barbell then led to machines. Why? Because every single time it's less frustration. Oh, look, it's more convenient. I'm like, yes. And who said that was a good thing? But how am I going to sell something simple? I'm going to create frustration. I'm going to give you a solution. And then you'll buy it because frustration is seen as a negative thing where actually it is your best friend by far. It just happens to be a tough love type of best friend.
Yeah. It makes me think too, as I've gotten along in my training, gotten older, I think back when I played team sports regularly. So if you play basketball regularly, like that's loaded with frustration because you make it, you miss it, you make the pass. There's all sorts of things within a game that can be frustrating that you have to overcome. And I think that's part of the thing that it is, and I talk about this a lot, but there's almost no better warm up for jumping and dunking than playing a game of basketball. You could do all the pre-planned, like I'm going to do this plyometric and this thing, but there's no, like you said, there's no frustration. There's no challenge in it. There's just something that's not there. And
so why do you spend 2 hours shooting free throws? Yeah. Because you missed and your team lost because of you. So you go, oh, I suck. So then you spend 2 hours a day shooting free throws, unless your name is Shaq, but that's different. But even him, I'm joking, even him, he had to work on it, right? How many times did Kobe Bryant ended up pre-matches, after the match training? Because he's like, I'm not going to fail my team again. All that is born out of frustration in an acute way. The greats have that capacity to handle acute frustration better than anybody else. The lesser people quit and find people to blame, find ways to not deal with the stuff. The great one, they go full on, oh, I suck at this, I failed, let me work my way through. And because their frustration is greater than yours.
Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely see that. And I think that used to be, sometimes I was just thinking about this in my own history, like when I was basically probably 14 through 18 or maybe even 13, I would just go out and just shoot forever. And it was like this constant like frustration of how do I get, and honestly, I needed to play against other people more. It was always such an individual mentality. But I think that sometimes I think, well, what did I gain by probably spending 1,000 hours, 2,000 hours just shooting around? But I think I gained a lot of, there's things I think I gained by doing that. I think there were that benefited later,
Look, if you don't play against others, then there's nothing creating the frustration. Yeah. Frustration is created by your environment.
Yes.
Your need to fit within the environment you're in. So you have two ways, right? You can escape your environment, change your environment, or you can deal with it. Right? But you see, most people now try to change their environment or escape it instead of going, no. That frustration is because you're not good enough. That's all. Start working.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit the barbell, right? It's like, who wants, because I got to tell you, a 200-pound sandbag and a 200-pound barbell is not the same thing. Like, Einstein was wrong. Gravity is not the same everywhere. Like a 200-pound sandbag is a completely different beast than a 200-pound barbell. It's just like the way you handle it and your core and then your hands and you have to squeeze. But it also follows your physiology. Like we have certain things called myotomes, nerves that go from the spine all the way and then links muscle together. That's evolution 101. We were given specific systems in place that we use. We don't have a choice. We have to use those systems. When you start to introduce barbells and stuff, you're trying to change that. I got news for you. You're not going to change it. They are, Thanos was right. Energy is finite. There's only so many forms of movement patterns we have because there's only so many myotomes. And they link things a certain way, which means squeezing the thing you lift is very important.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with that.
So you press the machine or you pull and your hand is kind of relaxed, then the whole thing doesn't work the same. And you're not signaling the nervous system. You're not understanding your environment in the way you are designed to. Naturally, that will affect you overall.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that idea of escaping frustration is where problem starts.
Yeah. I had a couple of thoughts with that. One with the frustration too. One thing I've been thinking about recently is like when an athlete has a bad workout, like how do you frame when you or an athlete has a bad workout? A lot of times it's like, oh, I didn't set a personal best or oh, I didn't hit the set I wanted to. But if you reframe that, you just think of it as, hey, you have energy now. You have frustration energy, and go use that. You're going to use that in the next training session. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're going to suck it up today or even a week. And then next week, you're going to make sure you don't, because for example, we deadlift only every 10 days to 2 weeks, never more often than that. So that means that my athlete's going to be frustrated from 10 days to 2 weeks if he has a bad deadlift stuff. So then the next time he goes into it, he's going to go at it like hardcore, because once you've done that 3 times in a row, you're like, either you quit deadlifting or you start making it happen. The choice is yours. So does that mean I'm going to solve it today? No. And that's the point, is you're going to have to live with it for the next 10 days. And then, but then you'll fix whatever was wrong last time. Otherwise, if you haven't fixed it, you have another 10 days to win. So you're either going to quit or you're going to start fixing the problem.
Yeah, I think about that in light of like there's some sprint coaches that have been on this podcast that there's a lot of different ways you could run sprint training. You could do it 3 times a week, or you could even, I've had people talk about just 1 time a week for some athletes. Like that was the thing for some athletes. And I think about, well, if you only sprinted fast once a week, maybe, I don't know, maybe you do something the other days, right? But like if you only got 1 chance a week and it was bad, like you have to sit there for 7 days in frustration, you know, and I'm sure, you know, it's probably the very low end of, you know, what would be possible, but at the least you have 7 days to be frustrated and be like, I'm so excited to do this again. And then
guess what you're going to do also? You're going to make sure that day you do everything right so that you get to the track in the right mindset, already ready. You know, you've eaten or not eaten, depending, but you're going to figure out real fast how to get the best possible workout.
Yeah.
So the problem is volume becomes, you know, like ego lifting in gyms was always about dudes trying to lift too heavy. We have entered an area where ego lifting now is volume. Oh, look, I trained 3 hours. I've done a 40-minute workout. I trained 17 times last week. And I'm like, who cares? If 16 of those workouts were shit, outside of grinding your soft tissue and your nervous system, what did you accomplish? Did you make progress? Because otherwise, why are we training? What does success look like? Is the point training 16 times a week, or the point is getting better? Which one are we shooting for? So are you getting better because training 16 times a week? A lot of time is just ego lifting that people won't like that. So they turn anything that is acute into a chronic state, right? So acute is frustration. Chronic is anxiety. You will notice those people that train 16 times a week are on the anxious side. It's because they're turning everything toward the chronic state. And I got news for you. That's not where performance lives.
Yeah, I was going to say, with the acute frustration, chronic anxiety, and then I know you've spent a lot of time consulting, at least in CrossFit and time in CrossFit. And my understanding, the CrossFitters I've seen, not everyone's like this, but I see compared to other workout or training groups, a lot of anxious people because they're always there. Yeah. They're always there way before doing all their warm-up stuff. It's like every day. You can't help but kind of see, at least in a fair amount of them, there is a lot of very visible anxiety on their faces. So that kind of
anxious people go toward CrossFit more, right? And then that form of CrossFit. So CrossFit, you have to understand there was CrossFit at the beginning and CrossFit.
Yes, I was going to say with the wrestling too. Yes,
was all acute. Greg Glassman, his seminar was Fran. 2.5 minutes, and you're going to take 2 hours to recover. All the workouts were under 12 minutes. If you look, there's a few outside of that, but most of them were actually very short. Helen, best cardio workout ever. You're supposed to do it under 8 minutes. So, like, you're pedaling. I mean, like, you can make yourself hurt in 8 minutes. That's for sure, right? It's too much, right? It's 8 minutes nonstop wrestling, rounds of 3 minutes, right? Type of thing. And then you had an evolution of CrossFit when those anxious people got there and everything, where suddenly the ego lifting was like, how often, how long can you train? And those people ended up doing 40-minute workout and everything. And then they started to change CrossFit because gym owners were like, well, that's what people want. And then everybody went toward the chronic way because who wants acute, right? Again, frustration. And so instead of dealing with the frustration, they turn it into longer workout. And now you're going to see CrossFit losing to High Rocks because High Rocks is CrossFit even longer. And so you can always push the ego lifting to our longer. Now your workout is 2 hours. I'm like, yes, but you suck. So who cares?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, unless you are like moving the needle forward. And some of those things to move the needle forward, as you talk about this, it brings up something I was thinking about a few weeks ago. The idea of, if your typical weekly workout, let's say you work out 5 times a week for an hour, intentionally making one of those days 20 minutes long just because Pareto's law. Like you have 20 minutes and just you have to figure out how to make this the best 20, and then you have to be frustrated that you didn't get another 40 that you usually comfortably get. Just stuff like that. And even the same thing with stringing out, you have to periodically making people rest longer between just to deal with the frustration to be excited to train. Just things like that. It's been little things that I've been thinking about that really bring in the multilateral nature of us. Because if we only think about it on one level, it's kind of eventually runs into a wall. And then you have to start looking at the other layers of who we are.
Because there's no limit to it. Once you go chronic, workout is 20 minutes, then 30 minutes, then 40 minutes. Then I can make it last 4 hours a workout. Yeah. People do that. Ultra marathon. I remember when marathon was a badass thing to do. Now it's not enough. Now it's ultra marathon, 50 miles. Yeah. Then that wasn't enough. Now it's 100 miles. Now you have guys running for 3 days straight. I'm like, yes, we can make that go. But then nothing has meaning anymore. Mm-hmm. So this is the problem CrossFit is facing, for example, where everybody's doing 40-minute workouts now, but then that means no one is a badass anymore. If no one is a badass, what are you doing CrossFit for? Because people went into CrossFit because the badasses were doing CrossFit. Mm-hmm. So it's like jiu-jitsu. It was badass to have a black belt. So you know what happened? Some dojo gave black belt easily because it was great to sell because people are like, I'm a badass. No, you're not. You cheated and you got your black belt when you don't deserve it. What happens after a time? Everybody has a black belt. Black belt is meaningless. Mm-hmm. So now people don't go to jiu-jitsu, they go toward grappling. Because, you know what I mean? Like, so it was the same thing with CrossFit. The second you start to go into chronic, into easier, into all that, the greatness of jiu-jitsu was it was so frustrating because you were going to get your ass kicked for 5 years. And the first 3 is everybody beats you up. I got choked out I got tapped at least 3,000 times. I kid you not. Like I calculated that. I must have tapped 3,000 times.
Yeah, I think about how, because that's the thing. I remember I was at Rafe Kelly's Return to the Source retreat 3 years ago, which is like adult, like human movement, a lot of parkour, a lot of rough housing with a martial type background. And I remember it was like, raise your hand in the group if you have martial arts experience. And I was one of the 2 out of like the 30 some that had none. And I think sometimes about what I've lost or I don't get by not having that. And I think about a lot of, even if you take exercise science or whatever it is, whatever you get out of the martial arts is not even, I think about that a lot, about the things you get by being in a combat sport and what that gives you from the perspective. If I'm a generalist training you physically, what that gives you. I'd be curious for you to expand on that a little bit. I had some other questions and comments about CrossFit.
But for give you a guy trying to take your head off.
Yeah.
So it gives you an environment you have no control over. So it defines you what success looks like. Okay, so for example, what do I mean by that? You go to the global gym. What does success look like? What is success in the global gym? You finish your session. What was success? I take a sandbag, I did 15 reps. Last time I did 16, I did 14. Okay, what happened? Whatever. I achieve, I go to that spot over there and come back. I've carried there and there. I know what success looks like. Am I getting stronger? How about strength endurance? Can I sprint up the hill in the sand? How long does it take me? 10 seconds, 12 seconds? Did I make progress? I can tell you exactly when I'm making progress or not because I know exactly what success looks like. I define success for me. Those are the numbers. Those are distances. I run there full speed. How long does it take? I set the things up. I know what success looks like. You go to the global gym. What does success look like? Now, you do 15 reps on the back squat. What if you fail at 14? Did you win or lose?
Yeah, in your mind, you're gonna lose if you were meant to go for 15.
Depends how you look at it because you reach failure. So you see what I mean? Like you can't answer that because there's an abstract to that question, right? So for example, with a machine, whether you do 14 or 16, there's a reach muscle failure. That's about all that matters. Okay, we reach muscle failure. But did you fail because the muscle was tired, because your nervous system gave up? Did you not breathe properly? Did you so now you're starting to introduce more and more and more complexity that takes you further and further away from understanding what success looks like. In jiu-jitsu, the guy is trying to take your head off. Did you get submitted today? Yes or no? Were you able to first survive, then defend, then attack, right? So did you survive better, longer? Are you able to understand what the guy is doing to you now so you can anticipate certain things? Then did you defend the thing? Did you submit the guy? Success is simple to understand and, transform it to, okay, I go from here, but you're blue belt, then you're a purple belt, then you're a brown belt, then you're a black belt, then you have competition. Again, we know what success looks like in the next 10 years of jiu-jitsu. What is success for the global gym? What is success if you do workouts that are constantly different, 30 minutes long, where you constantly change the movement or the order? How do you know you made progress? See where we're going with this? We're going toward chronic because we're trying to avoid confronting people with their mistakes or their lack of progress. Because frustration, how do you sell things? You create frustration and then you provide a solution for it.
Yeah.
But then after a while, all you do is frustrate, release, frustrate, release, frustrate, release. It's basically porn.
Yeah. I know for me, training throughout my 30s changed things a lot for me just because it was like track and field, sprinting and jumping. And of course, eventually as you age, you're going to get to a point where the personal bests are harder to come by. You're going to have a lot more frustration in the process of trying to get personal bests and things like that. And so one of the things I found, I was never excited to train it, or I should say, it was no longer exciting to train to just go out and be like, all right, I'm going to run 330 meters, laser timed. I hope I run my fastest, like that kind of thing. Because at that point, you need just different stimuli. You need different measures and layers of success to make it like how
also, you're not going to win anything.
Yeah,
so
exactly. Yeah, you have to change it.
Objective, right? Because before you're trying to compete, at some point you go, okay, I'm not winning anymore. So what am I training for now? So now you define success, right? So, and that's something we have to do continuously, right? But in order to achieve whatever success it is that we decide we're gonna go toward, then you'll build up the frustration toward that. So it doesn't matter the training that you choose. It only matters that you know what success looks like for you, so that we can set up the training toward you becoming better, not changing, not escaping the environment, just creating an environment where frustration is going to happen so that we can get to the progress you wanted to make. After that, the choice is yours, by the way. I'm not saying there's necessarily you should have the same goals as me or stuff like that. It's just like, all right, what are the goals? What does success look like? And now we're going to set up a training environment where, yes, you're going to be frustrated. But if we don't do that, if we take the frustration and try to lower it, but still try to make progress, then you're going to see anxiety exploding because you took something that was acute into chronic, which of course is easier, but it's going to eat at you because physiologically speaking, that is not how we are designed. That's not how we do things.
Yeah. So just to recap that, because I think that's such a huge point. Just making sure I understand. So basically, when we take training and we lower frustration, but we extend, so we make the bar and the total bar, whatever success is,
keep it the same.
Yeah, and then just draw it out longer. And I think that's a common frustration in like track and field. Hey, instead of like getting a really competitive situation and timing sprints and trying to bring all the social and emotional factors into it, well, let's just do more sprints and longer. And we'll do. I remember I worked with one coach once who was very when I was coaching back at Wilmington College, it was a very volume heavy guy who was working with the 400 meter runners, the quarter milers. And he was a guy who I think his physiology was served well by more speed endurance. Like he was more of just like a leaner frame. Yeah, leaner frame, kind of tolerates volume and capacity real well. And I remember there was one day that the 400 runners were doing a workout and it was like 16 by 200. And they're all the same pace, basically. And I'm just watching these guys do this. And you just think about like what you're saying, like there's no frustration. It's just kind of survive, just do it, Yeah.
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 At the same pace on top of it, might as well. You'll destroy the sprinters doing that.
Yeah.
If you have a phone, it was more like, sprinter type stuff, you'll just destroy him. Like his entire physiology goes against 16 times 200 is insane, by the way.
Yeah.
That's an insane number.
Yeah.
People on 16 times 200. Oh my God. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Right. So just because, so he probably could do 12 times 200 at his best. So his athlete should do 16. You can always push that because then the next guy is going to say 20 times because I'm tougher than coach. I can make you do more shit. Yes. And you're going to break people and you're going to kill the more, athletic sprinters. You're going to, this is just ego lifting, or in that case, ego coaching. It's not, it's like if I'm imagining as a guy just say put more weight on the bar. It's like, well, it depends.
Yeah.
It's just to achieve what? It's just things don't work like that. So you have to understand whenever you talk about people, you have to go somatic versus cognitive, right? And you have to go chronic versus acute. Right? Those four are basically the basis of everything. Right. So you have to understand that when you look at frustration, I'm not just talking cognitively speaking. I'm talking physiologically speaking. Frustration has a very specific physiological effect, stress hormones, stuff like that, that are necessary to kick your own ass and makes you make progress. The second you start to lower the frustration cognitively, you're going to lower somatically as well. Is that what we're shooting for? Because remember, for a sprinter, like nothing is harder than those 50-meter sprints at full speed, 7, 8 of them by the 7 and 8, your entire body muscles are screaming, they're cramping everywhere because the physiological demand is so high. But there's a point to that, right? Is to teach you the last 3 seconds and then, there's a point to all this. If you lower the acute to our chronic, cognitively speaking, you're going to do it physiologically as well. Is that the point? Because what if instead of 6 times 50 meters, I make you do 16 times 50 meters? But then what am I achieving physiologically speaking? So it's going to be that for the 400 meters. All you're going to get at guys are going to, cognitively speaking, they can't handle the intensity 16 times 200. There's no way. Right. So necessarily that pace, they're going to get really good at this. But how is that making me win on the 400? Which means I have the same pace from beginning to end. But is the point not dying at the end of the 400 meters, or is the point winning the 400 meters? Because I got news for you. By the end of 400 meters, you're going to die. Right? If you know that. If you go a little bit too fast at the beginning, last 100 is going to hurt you. So that for the women, the last 400 meters, like that Dutch girl, she died in the last 20 meters because it hurt so much. Yeah, because she was like, fuck it. I'm going to try to run my best. And sometimes it doesn't work because, it's so hard. But the point is winning, right? At a competitive level. The point is trying to get to do better. So that whole volume stuff, you're going to see a lot of ego coaching, a lot of ego lifting. I see that a lot in the fitness industry right now, where the focus is on chronic, is on volume and everything. But to me, we're turning into the porn version of fitness, or the fitness version of porn, where it's like a little bit of frustration, a little bit of release, and then all the time. Yeah. Because it's a lot easier to handle. I'm like, yes, it is easier to handle. That doesn't make it a good idea.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Athletic Development Games. The new Athletic Development Games Playboost Library is an app that is filled with engaging games to build athleticism in kids ages 4 to 10 in a fun way that builds a love of movement and movement learning. Games include those for speed, hand-eye coordination, jumping, and the essential athletic movements. The app is great for parents and also sports coaches and trainers who are looking to improve their own library of engaging games and ideas for athletes. To learn more and sign up, you can head to athleticdevelopmentgames.com/app. That's athleticdevelopmentgames.com/app. Yeah. The power of withholding. That was something that I was having a conversation with Aaron Cantor, who's, I spoke of Rafe Kelly, and that he does a lot of like social, emotional, cultural, the meaning of movement type stuff. And Aaron is a coach for Evolve, Move, Play there. And Aaron and I had a conversation. It wasn't on this podcast, I don't think, but it was about like, what's the value of doing like a long isometric hold, like a 5-minute wall sit or a lunge for 5 minutes? Well, it's withholding because you kind of like, if you're doing other things, like if I'm going to do a sprint workout or play a sport, but you make someone do something that's kind of long and boring at some point, it's within means, it's not like, it's not like, hey, we're going to go run gassers for 30 minutes in the practice. There's like the value of that is also like a withholding. There's almost like you don't just get the thing, because I think there's almost a pendulum too sometimes. Whereas like we get so gamified, maybe we can make training so gamified, it's always about getting the thing. But then on the flip side, at least at some point, there should be like a, hey, this is going to suck. And it's within reason, you know, but there's also like you have to withhold. That could also be just a rest day too, you know? Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
There's a tremendous frustration in holding something for 5 minutes when you're used to, you try to make a 100-meter sprinter hold an LSIP or whatever, they're going to lose their mind. Because they go, look, what is this? That's not what I do. I'm emotional. I use that, to, you know how they are, right? You're making just stay relaxed for a long time, they're going to lose their mind. I'm like, good, frustration again. Yeah. Like, so my point is we need to create more frustration, not less.
Yeah.
Right. So the somatically, maybe not, but cognitively, the frustration will be enormous for that hold or stuff like that. By the way, the isometric contraction, your nervous system keeps going up. Whenever you do dynamic, you always level off in your sympathetic state. Whenever you go isometric, it keeps going up. So you can reach levels of sympathetic that are tremendously high in isometric. Yep, because the pain keeps going up and up and up, never levels up. With dynamic movement, there's always a moment where the pain stays the same. That is not true of isometric holds, because pain is not just a physiological thing. It's an adaptation of the sympathetic nervous system.
I would love to get your opinion on this. So Jeremiah Flood is a coach from, I think, California, and he was talking about, so Jay Schrader, I find him fascinating because he has a lot of long isometric hold stuff in his training. Its brand is being very difficult and hard. And one of Jay's warm-ups that Jeremiah took on, that I've taken on, is basically like do an isometric lunge hold. So a pretty like stretch range lunge for probably like 2 to 5 minutes on the extreme, but it's long. It's long and it's not easy. And then after you do that on each leg, you do like altitude drops, like 20, 30, 40, 50 from like 18, 24, maybe 30 inches, something like that, where you're just dropping and sticking it, and then go do your sprint workout. And I found that to be so powerful. Just because, and it's very simple. Like it's very simple. You're not just going through like a bunch of things, which I think a bunch of things are okay, but like it really. Anyways, I'd be curious what your take is on something like that with the sympathetic. I never thought about
exactly what he's doing.
Yeah.
By the way, warm up for my strongman stuff. Many times I do minute hold overhead with a yoke, and then I'll do minute hold with a farmer, because it warms up everything in isometric. And again, your nervous system will be very much primed to all going like this. So if you see there's isometric, then it does a bunch of eccentric. Yeah. And then why? Because sprint is all concentrated. And so there's some eccentric on the hammies. But anyway, you could see like he's trying to prime the system toward generating a specific force and everything. On the nervous system perspective, I do very much close to what he does. I don't do the drops and stuff like that, but the holds and everything, I do a lot of that. That's why I like the sandbag carries so much, because yes, you're moving, but your upper body holds the thing.
Yeah, that's huge.
Very comfortable.
Yeah, I'd never thought about that before. That like, it's almost like one of those, as you expand your frame of training, it's like, oh, here's another layer that really makes sense for a lot of things with that. Because the one thing I have thought with the isometrics is it's like, those holds, it's almost like a place you're freezing the body so that the mind, or like you said, the somatic piece can fully flourish. I also, too, I was going to say, you've mentioned somatic a few times. I haven't used that phrase or talked about that, but the difference between the mind and the somatic system, I would love for you to just briefly clarify or get into that too.
Don't get me wrong, I'm oversimplifying because you cannot separate the body and the mind. They're all the same. Like the brain is part of the nervous system. It's an extension of the nervous system. The brain is the nervous system and vice versa, right? So when we mean somatic, we mean bottom-up signals, right? So that means the heart, the enteric system, the stomach and all stuff, like all the body basically signaling to the brain. That technically is the somatic system, right? Whereas the top-down orders, which means the brain telling the body stuff, is what we call the cognitive. You have to understand one does not exist without the other. They always communicate continuously. Even bottom-up and top-down is not that simple because a lot of it is electromagnetic fields communicating. So anyway, the complexity of the system is ridiculous. But in order to talk about those things, we need to oversimplify. So what we have with the somatic is the bottom-up type of thing, whereas cognitive would be top-down type of idea. It's not that simple, but you get the point. Sure. So those two are at the end are the same. But from a conversation perspective, you have to look at it like this, which means the The frustration cannot be, for example, from a skill perspective, which means I cannot do that movement. Coordination, obviously, is going to require mineralization. So we're talking almost cognitive, even though because it's mineralization, you're talking about a physical component, right? Learning a skill is actually a physical thing. The mineralization, myelin between the neurons and all of that, you have to create specific connections in order to get better. But that's more toward the cognitive because it's a top-down thing. Whereas somatic would be the strength of the heart. The heart beats fast, but the heart also beats hard. Is how fast it sends the blood is also very important. It's not just how fast it beats and how much blood it sends, it's how fast that blood is being sent. So the strength of the heart matters as probably more than the speed of the heart, right? So back to running versus acute. So there's number of systems like that. The problem with all of this is that most people think the brain decides. That's not true. For example, the number one signal strength, the number one thing in the body that has the highest strength of signaling is the heart. Because turns out Homer Simpson was right. You can live without a brain. You cannot live without a heart. The second the heart has a problem, you're done. Yeah. It's the number one hierarchy, decides everything. So that means that how fast is pushing blood will decide so many things in your body all the way to your brain. So it's not, I'm going to decide this, because you see that with anxiety. I want that. It's like, yes, but it doesn't matter. You live in an environment that creates a need. That need happens on a somatic level, which means heart, stomach, number of things. Those build a structure that eventually get into a conscious thought. But the conscious thought only exists based on the structure below it. So there's 8 hierarchies in the system. Conscious thought starts to get there on the 6th level, 6, 7, and 8. The below that, you have no idea what's happening. It is not coming to your conscious thought because it is not for you to deal with. For example, your heart or the blood pressure. When I go up or go down, it's automatic. But someone is doing it. It just happens to be a hierarchy that knows that when you stand up, the blood pressure has to go up. Otherwise, you would pass out. So all this is being done proactively by your heart and everything. So that means that there's really different types of intelligence throughout your body, and each hierarchy does what it does. So a lot of those hierarchies are somatic in the sense of it's bottom up. So anxiety is not as simple as, but I just want that. It's like, yes, but also inflammatory levels matter, and that's nothing to do with your head. It actually starts with your body. For example, cytokines, inflammatory cytokines are being released by visceral fat. So that means that your waist to hip ratio will decide your inflammatory markers, which has huge influence on your anxiety. So it turns out there's an anxiety cognitively, which means I'm not getting what I want, but there's also a somatic anxiety. I'm producing too much inflammatory things in my body. So the system has to deal with it. You know what I mean? So that's why they always end up like this. So that's why you cannot just murder someone in a training session without having massive effects on the whole system.
Yeah. I love that. It's just because, for many reasons, one thing that I think about a lot is just when a lot of times just training just becomes so linear so quickly. And it's like, it's almost like mind and structure, it's like conscious thought and structure. And it's like the polar opposite. I like, there was a good, Frank Ferencich he does a lot of he calls it the long body. Like, you are not just you're a product of your environment, your family, your ancestors, your peers, your nutrition, and the food that's everything, and it's just like, we don't, and a lot of tribes think about it that way.
Do you know that most of your cell is given to you by your mother, not by your DNA?
Interesting.
The cytoplasm, the membrane, there's mitochondria. That's not given to you by, you are not creating that based on your DNA. You are giving it directly by your mother. That's why we'll never be able to clone correctly, like the way they say. It's like, no fucking way. It's not your DNA. Your mother matters. Your mother is giving you that. So you are far more than your conscious thought. That's a very Western way of looking at it, and it is completely wrong. Cells have intelligence. Like, there's a guy named Michael Levin who does about that, bioelectricity and then the intelligence of cells. He's in line for the next Nobel Prize, trust me. His work is amazing. And it talks about the intelligence of cell. We are not a conscious thought that decides things. Your conscious thought is based on the structure, and that structure is not conscious. So there's so much going on into all this, which is why I hate that ego lifting toward volume, because they're trying to address conscious thoughts.
Yeah.
I don't care. I'm like, do it anyway.
Yeah.
It's a lot simpler to turn off your conscious thoughts than it is to turn out your somatic system, because you have no control over it.
Yeah.
Like, we need to make your heart stronger. Right. There's no conscious thought who's going to do that. I got news for you. There's only one way. You're going to have to go leave that shit over there and then make your heart go like that. Because otherwise, and by the way, I do a lot of work with PTSD. We're talking suicidal people. That's the work I do at UCLA, right? With the studies we're doing. I got to tell you, PTSD is linked to the strength of the heart. It's all over the stuff. Your conscious thoughts have nothing to do with that. Like, we see all the time that the level of stress of someone is relating to their cardiovascular function. So it turns out, yes, oxidative stress and all that. So there's a physical component, but there's also the mental stress affects your cardiovascular function and vice versa. So your heart, the health and strength of your heart just will rule so many things, including your conscious thoughts. So there's only one way to do it. You have to get off the fucking couch. But if you just go into ego volume lifting, you are affecting, obviously, the heart. You might be making it endurance, but you're not making it strong. That can create its own set of issues. You can't just be strong. You also have to have the strength endurance. Otherwise, you're going to have a type of issue. So that's why also isometric is great, because it's part of the whole system. We need isometric. With strongmen, I do so much isometric work. Grip is all isometric. Farmer's walk, you're squeezing. When they start to get tired, your heart rate starts to go up like crazy because your sympathetic is getting jacked. So isometric is a very important part of the training. That's why you can't just do one type of training ever, because the human body is not designed like that.
Yeah.
And you're not going to change it. I got news for you. You are not changing the human body just because you want to. And that's where anxiety comes in. But usually it's like, yes, but I want to do that. I'm like, yes, and I don't care, because, and neither does your body, by the way. You still have to get out the couch and you're going to have to lift some heavy shit. So you're going to have to breathe hard, right? And do some heavy stuff. Yeah.
I love that. For one, I have two things with that. One, just quickly, and feel free to. And I love this conversation too, because I had all these questions and I haven't even looked at my question sheet since we started. Maybe I'll get there. But one thing I've heard this, I've heard strength coaches talk about this, is trying to sneak isometrics in a training program for athletes, like get more isometric moments in, which I absolutely 100% agree with. But I also think about, well, there's two ways you could do that. One, you could have your lifts and be like, all right, hit an ISO here, with, barbell or whatever, hit an ISO here. But, and I think that's great, but wouldn't it be better in some ways, or more alive, to be like, well, go carry a sandbag and then you get all your ISOs in, or pick up. I mean, and again, if you have an athlete in a sport, maybe you want to have a more controlled weight room setting. I totally understand that. But I do like that where the ISO comes and it's not expected,
Cool. It's not more control. Yeah. That's not true, because of the myotome. So, because remember, like that idea of controlling the weight room is wrong, because you have myotomes, which means you have pre-decided movement patterns. Once you go in the weight room and you have a coach saying, we're going to do that, do you know for sure that movement, for example, let me give you an example. We're going to hold a barbell. Right. You hold it like this. What in life can you hold like that? Close hand, pronated, shit ton of weight. Give me something where you could do it like that. Most of the time, you're going to be neutral. Most of the time, you're going to go squeeze.
Yeah.
This one, just hold it with your fingers. Right. So that's not a movement pattern we develop, because we never had the need for it. Evolution took a while to get here. Right. So we have specific, for example, whatever you carry, you squeeze. Right. Usually neutral, because your hands have to touch. This is not often.
Yeah.
Right. So most of the stuff is neutral. All right. So farmers, at least it's here. It's not a sandbag, but at least we're getting closer. Right. So, but if I start moving, usually this is going to stay. So my core is going to work against my hips, wanting to shift. So isometric, but with some anti-rotation in a very dynamic way of training anyway. If I'm holding like this, do I put the weight on my feet, on my heels, on my toes? How about, do I arch? Do I put my shoulders back? So now you're starting to dictate all the different positioning of the body. Are you sure you are within now the movement pattern decided by your myotomes? Because the carry, when you move forward, you don't have a choice. We built a certain way. When you're in the weight room in a controlled environment, how do you know that the movement patterns you are deciding are correct? And by the way, since we're changing the stuff, everything is percentage based, right? Like when I carry this way based on my levels, it's 1% there, 3%, whatever. My body knows that. You do not. So you are deciding that we're all going to do the same hold that affects percentages differently based on different physiology and different leverage. You see where you could go wrong really fast with that. No matter what, philosophically speaking, that idea is wrong. That control in the weight room usually leads to more problem than it solves. We take a functional movement. There's nothing more functional than carrying a rock, a sandbag, something, because you're squeezing it. If you're squeezing in, guess what happened? Your core has to engage, like you're getting punched, right? You're pushing your obliques out, and now you're not going to let your hips move too much. Otherwise, the thing would fall because you're doing that. So you have to keep under control. So now you're working anti-rotation like you should.
Yeah.
Right. So instead of working anti-rotation in the gym under a controlled environment, and you don't know percentage-wise how far you should take this versus that, because again, now you're messing with different myotomes. If you carry something heavy, naturally, you're going to go toward the correct way. What I mean by that is look at the top strongmen doing the farmer's walk. They all do it the same. How funny is that? It's always the same. Yoke carry, it's always the same. Sandbag carry, it's always the same. Look at all top strongmen, they always carry the same way. The second you start to go into static movement, this is where you start to see different movements. But when it comes to carrying, there's only one way to do it.
Yeah.
It's farming. We've been doing this for 10,000 years. The body knows exactly what to do. I'm not smart enough to take you into a control environment, tell you, put your shoulder here, you don't need there, and hopefully I'm right. Honestly, I'm not good enough to do that. So I make them do the stuff that they naturally can do correctly.
Yeah, I do think I definitely agree in the sense that I know for me, it's almost like this expansive, compressive, and expansive phase of coaching. And the compressive phase is how much can I do in the weight room with all these positions that I've decided that are, like you said, like it is a little arbitrary. Like much can I do with all these positions? And where I've kind of gone, because I realized before I got that way, it was just play basketball, even like I was really into breakdancing for a little bit, and my triceps actually got really big doing like the turtle move, which is like you think your elbows are in your gut and you keep your whole body off the ground. You have to like move and shift around, like, which I think, you know, with the what was the name of the nerve that you mentioned with the like the connection? Myotomes. Yeah, if you think about the myotome action, that's just massive and it's fun. And so like, and yes, I lifted, but it wasn't, you know, it was just real basic. It was squats. It was like barbell step ups. It was a block in my basement for a set of 10 that I kind of finagled together. And as the more I got along the journey, you start to realize you start to almost trade some of your innate human just fluidity, function, just that quick response for, well, hey, well, these lifts all went up an extra 20 pounds. Well, it's like, well, yeah, but what happened to the basic, you know, the engine, the real athletic engine? And so I think that
any athletes, right? You make him do basic gymnastics, very important, body weight. You make him do basic wrestling, some swimming, some sprinting. Mm-hmm. Tell me you don't have a very good athlete that is mostly balanced.
Yeah. I think that's just what we've lost. We've lost so much of that. And even I would throw even like just dance in there for kids. And the idea is, I heard this too, the idea that a lot of girls are innately better movers than boys now, because what do girls do? They're in gymnastics and they do dance. And then if they play their sport, you know, they may have a little bit more of some of those innate qualities. Whereas if I'm a boy and I just grew up playing,
because boys are stuck in a room now 6 to 7 hours a day, which is opposite of what we need. So boys need, you know what they need? They need to wrestle.
Yes, I was just saying isometrics too. Yeah, 100%.
Girls do gymnastics, boys wrestle.
Yeah,
boys should do gymnastics, girls should wrestle. But if you look at the thing, wrestling, gymnastics is a bit like classical dancing. It fits the women very well, right? Very controlled, very movement, very precise movement, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. The wrestling is pounding and take you down and very aggressive, and it's very much on the boys' side, right? Boys used to wrestle on the playground.
Yes.
You fight, to fight with the guy. By the way, that's how you learn not to punch people. Is at 6 years old, when you punch the guy, punch you back, you go, I don't like that. And that's how you learn not to punch people, right? Yeah. So we used to do that. That's gone. So boys have no reason to move. You put them in gymnastics, it's a highly structured environment with a lot of rules and stuff. And most boys early on are not ready for that. They want to play, wrestle, rough. They want a, rough, tumble type of thing. That's not what gymnastics is. So it fits girls much better. Like that's the school system is creating an environment that is starting in the 80s that fits girls much, much, much better than boys.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense.
You see that in movement as well.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. That's one of the things with the sandbag too, that I think it's like you're wrestling this thing. You're not just, and that's why, for me, I mean, it's been probably, let's see. Well, my daughter, my recent addition to my family was born about 10 months ago. And ever since she was born, that I just been sandbags in the garage, like just because I didn't have time at first. At first I didn't have any time. I have like a fixed deadlift in the basement. And after like 3 months of just sandbags in the garage, I'm like, I'm good. I'm just going to keep doing the sandbags. And I was doing it before. Very strong. But
the difference is, look, like sandbag is wrestling. Because whenever there's sandbag, I look at it and it's like, it's you or me, bitch. But it's, someone is going to lose. It's you or me, but someone is losing right now. Like there is that stuff. I've never felt that with a barbell.
Yeah, I agree. And even picking it up, like to squat, like my routine twice a week with squats for sandbag. It's just like, it's kind of like easy strength. I start at 2 sets of 5. I build up to 3 sets a day. Then I throw some more sand in and repeat. I don't even weigh it. I just do it. But it's like every time you pick it up, you're fighting it. Like there's a fight just to get it in position that.
Never lift a heavy sandbag the light way. Like I'm just going to pick it up. Oh, hell no. Like it requires every fiber of your body. The setup requires every fiber. Just approaching the sandbag, you're already like, oh shit. Mm-hmm. So that means you're ready for it. Whereas the barbell, it's nice. You put your hands, you have your setup. Again, it's very structured, very rule-oriented. It's not the roughness of the sandbag that honestly, the sandbag is going to fight you.
Yes.
Like it doesn't want to go up either way. And you're going to have to make it go what you want. So the sandbag tells you what to do. The barbell, you decide what you want to do with it.
Yeah. I had this thought. I would love to at someday like coach like a freshman basketball team. And there wasn't a strength coach at the school, because what I would do is I would just have sandbags at practice. And that would be the only physical. It's just, everything we're going to do physically is right here. We're going to play, maybe instead of if you get mad and make kids run, court, whatever, suicides, maybe we do that, but we do it, but maybe we'll, maybe occasionally it's, well, hey, grab a sandbag and go take a lap.
Wrestling and a football team. Yeah. The two things we're going to do is we're going to do sandbags and we're going to do sprint drills.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Until you're done, especially the wrestlers. Because starting the shoot off the foot instead of off the leg would gain them that half a second that is so important, and you will not tell the guy you're shooting by moving just off the foot. I don't understand how wrestling coaches don't know that, but I can tell you something for wrestling. Sandbags, sprint drills. Oh man, would I love to have a team that I could play with. Same for football, by the way. Oh, I would love to do that. Not soccer, like American football. Yeah.
Yeah, or adult fitness classes, honestly. Like if you just had a bunch of sandbags and do some sprinting.
Gymnastics, sandbags, sprint drills.
Yes.
We're good.
Oh, that is it. Honestly, that's a big part of what I do for my training.
That's my training.
Yeah.
That's my training.
Yeah.
The gymnastics, like sprint drills. There's a greatness to that I've been doing this shit for a long time. Mm-hmm. And everything else after that is specialization.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it is. And it's, I think too, of like synergy of movements, in the sense of sometimes we break things down into so many parts, and it's like, well, what if we just did a few simple things that are in a sense greater than some?
Okay, that's a great conversation right there. Can you break it down into isolation? I'm going to go back to myotomes. Those are nerves that go from the spine and link muscle together, right? By the way, same nerve links certain organs and things. So very important system in place there. But there's only so many myotomes. We can count them. We did. we have lists of that. So that means that how can you have, no matter what, the combination of those will design the movement patterns. That means that, yes, there's a tremendous amount of combination, but it is a limited amount of combination. So can you really go toward isolation? It's like, can you? So because now you're going to have that myotome versus this one or whatever. It's like, okay, but if you do that specific isolation, but without, for example, squeezing the hand or whatever, there has to be limits to each movement then. Because again, we were created a specific way, evolution. So myotomes decide from the spine all the way to the head. What if you stop it somewhere? Then what happens to the whole system? It cannot activate properly. So can you break down movement as much as they think they can? That's a great conversation. How come we're not talking about it? How come we're not testing that? How come, like, for example, you want to activate the rear delt or whatever? I'm like, right, but if your hands are loose, what tells the system to pull correctly? Why would it? If you remove the feet, if your feet are not strong, how could you run fast? Because what's telling the system to pound? The foot. But if the foot is weak, the system will slow down because you'll go, if I go faster, the foot is going to break. If I break, I can't run. So that antenna is going to slow down the entire system necessarily. So we're trying to make the hip stronger. I'm like, but what happens if the foot isn't? So you're trying to pull hard, but what if your grip is weak? What if you're not using wraps or you're not activating or you don't have a strong grip? Then how can your back be strong if your hands are not strong? Yeah. First thing strong men have is a very strong grip. And you notice they all have a very strong back. Is that related then?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Or is that just causation versus I mean correlation? But there's a conversation there that weirdly we do not have often.
Yeah, even for me, one of my better lifts has always been a deadlift, even though in some ways I'm not designed well for, like, I have a way longer torso than my legs. And like there's just a lot of things that, like, I should be a better squatter. But one thing I've always had is a really strong grip. And I can't, and if I train pull-ups, I can get very good at pull-ups. That's just always come naturally. But I always wonder how much, my grip strength has played into assisting that. How much, if I had a weak grip.
You made your back stronger, and the deadlift is a lot of back. So maybe you're a back lifter, but that's okay as long as your back is strong enough. There's plenty of back lifters out there. Yeah. Right? I can tell you from experience that back strength and grip strength are related.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. Even to see it in my son. He's 6, and I took him rock climb. Like, our winter activity last year was going rock climbing. It's like the seasons or whatever. But it's like we haven't been doing any of that in a long time. He just climbs trees now. And we were messing around in the basement with some of the, this is my crazy dad moment. I have a force meter that you can do like a mid-thigh pull and get your max. And it's like a game. So I had my kids do it just for fun. They think it's fun. But then they wanted to hang on these rock rings I have hanging up in my basement. And my son just decided to do a pull-up. And I was like, for 6 years old, that's not like crazy by any means, but he's a kind of a wiry kid, and he has a really strong grip. Like, if he's wrestling me, it's like very apparent. And I was just thinking about maybe the link between that and that ability too. Whereas my daughter doesn't have as strong of a grip, and I have like a grip tester they try too every now and then, and she can't do one. She's a little older, so I was just thinking about those, those correlations.
Well, there's you're going to squeeze here, like the whole thing goes throughout the entire pulling system, but that's what tells the body to pull. Is the antenna is here. The body knows it's heavy here. You know what I mean? Like, even when you're squeezed, like you grab a sandbag, you feel it there. Like, there's a number of things like that are very important. That's my problem with isolation. Isolation work, I much rather do it through gymnastics because at least you go through the hands and feet.
Yeah. Yeah. So that brings me into, I did want to get into a couple of questions on the list that relate to this, and it's all related for sure. I guess the other thing I just did want to say, maybe it's, you've already spoken about it enough, and maybe we can loop this in. Maybe I'll just loop it into the question as I was just talking about, like, the heart. You talk about the heart. Maybe I'll bring it in here, as there's a lot of research now that talks about, like, intelligence in the heart. Like, there's brain type cells in the heart, and I can't help but think that has to be related to how we feel emotions in our body. Like if you feel shame or fear or embarrassment or anxiety or whatever, or joy, there's a place you feel those things. And yeah, just kind of to me,
it's far more complex than that. Than people understand. Like, for example, like we saw that the heart is directly linked into a part of the brain that links to the me. Me and I are two different parts of the brain. They are not the sense of identity. Me and I are not the same. I is actually action-based. Me is more like how you feel things, and the heart is directly related. So it's a left ventricular anyway. It's directly, the heart is directly leading to the sense of me in the brain. So there's that. The heart has a electromagnetic field about 1,000 times stronger than the brain, right? The heart has its own neurons, its own nervous system, and it's the first one and everything. So there is an intelligence of the heart, not necessarily a conscious thought, but that doesn't mean there's not an intelligence there. And more importantly, it communicates with the rest of the body. We've seen that the change of emotion will affect the way the heart communicates with the other organs, because it does that as well. And actually a specific type of control of emotion can link all the organs together, and they all follow the rhythm of the heart. That's what they call coherence.
Yes.
It's based on the rhythm of the heart. So the heart is the first hierarchy, because no heart, no life. That's just where it starts. So that means that the rhythm of the heart decides what the other hierarchies are doing. It is the first system. So that means that cardiovascular health, the strength of the heart and everything will decide how the rest of the body does what it does. So a lot of the back and forth is going to go through the heart. And so it happens that the sense of me, where a lot of that sense of identity is, links directly to the heart. So that expression of broken heart might actually be true, because anytime there's a link, it goes both ways, right? It's a feedback loop. And so a strong emotion has specific effects on the heart and vice versa.
Yeah.
Nothing like that idea, that very Christian idea of the soul, and then it directs the body, that is more about that thing that follows. That I can tell you from a scientific perspective is complete bullshit. Doesn't mean there's no soul, but the idea that the soul controls the body, fuck no.
Yeah, that's where Aaron
It might be the soul, but that's not what's going back and forth between conscious thought and the body. That your conscious thoughts are a part of the somatic system. It's not just conscious thought and then everything else. That is absolutely not true.
Yeah, that was just to jump in. That was something Aaron Cantor I mentioned had said. He was a yoga instructor for a long time, and the thing that bothered him was that it's almost like people just want to separate the mind out of the body so much. Like, let's get out of this thing, versus no, you are an embodied, your experience here on earth, like you said, if it's soul or whatever is the source of the consciousness, it's an embodied experience. It's not like a, like an alien in there. Like, I think they used to have like the little drawings, like a little person controlling in the brain or something. It's like, no, you are all of it. And that all feeds into the consciousness that you are experiencing. Yeah.
You are the system. You're not, you know what I mean? Like, you are the system. Your conscious thoughts are part of the system. And like we saw that just with the gut biome, for example. We saw tremendous behavior change originated in a change of the gut biome, where people have reacted differently. How would you know? Because remember, interoception is signals of the inside going toward the other structure. So by definition, it's always you. So then how would you know that you is different? I change your gut biome. How would you know you're different? You're not. You're still you, but the gut biome makes you behave differently. Yeah, but it probably feels exactly the same. How would you know anyway? So that's the problem with your conscious thought, is you wouldn't know if you had a different one.
Yeah. Yeah.
It still feel right.
Yeah.
Hey, I felt that. Yes, but did you feel it based on the environment? Did you? Yeah, I mean, it's not that simple. Like we saw that with the gut biome, it has profound changes in people. Profound changes.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to measure like elite athletes and performers. And, we study their mind a lot, which I think is really important. I think we should look at the mind and the practices of elite performers way more than we do. I think it's way underestimated. But things even like self-talk, how they think and believe and operate. But then it'd be interesting to get like a scan of like kind of like what you mentioned, their coherence. What's their internal system like? What is their body like? And even like with the coherence, I know the Heart Math Institute, they do a lot with like, they talk about the coherence of the heart and mind. And I think the breath is the regulation piece or a regulator of that. And if you're more coherent, your reaction times are better. Things just happen in flow better. You don't have to try so hard with your forebrain or whatever, because that's what we just default to, I think.
There's only one issue. Yes. Yeah. And I read a lot of their stuff and I agree fully. There's only one issue with that is the breath is also dictated by the nervous system. If you're more in sympathetic, you're going to mouth breathe way more. Inhale, exhale is going to be harder. And there's always a moment where you cannot be forced, because if you try to force an anxious person to nose breathe, you're just going to create panic attacks, because this is a physiological component to that as well. So the idea that we control our breath is true to a degree, but it's not a truth in itself, because there's no truth without context, right? The state of your nervous system decides your breathing. If you try to change your breathing to change your state, you're not dealing with your environment either. So there's always a moment where that idea of controlling your breath will not stand if it does not fit within your environment. You can't namaste the bear away.
Yeah, like if you're trying to, I mean, you can temporarily do it, like if you're really controlling.
But then you die.
But then
because the bear will eat you. Yes, a yogi could stay like this while the bear is coming at him. That's very true.
Yeah.
But that's not a good idea.
Yeah. It reminds me of Marv and Gary Marinovich back, they were training like, I think it was BJ Penn, like a martial artist, and one of their things was, I don't think they were looking at the heart and mind. They were just had him doing different things, and they found what spiked his heart rate the most, like different fighting activities. What spikes your heart rate the most? Now let's work in this area more and try to find a way to make it more efficient. That seems like a more embodied way to go about it. Yeah.
How do you react to that? Let's make you more resilient at that.
Yeah.
Right? So controlling your breath to become more resilient, I'm all for it. But again, there's always that moment where you go back in a weird way to conscious thought. Conscious thought dictates the breath. Breath dictates the body. Right, but the body is dictated by the environment.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. So I want to, this is so much good stuff. I want to kind of wrap it up with a couple things that maybe are more, you could say, are just like very, okay, here's a way we could go about this. One thing that maybe this is a little bit off. It was the first question I had though, but I think it fits with grip. Cause you mentioned this, the connection, the grip. I've seen a study or a case study where if people trained on fat bars with barbells, their total strength got better versus like just a regular bar. But I think about that with like the feet too, like, and maybe in the form of drops or plyometrics or, parkour landings or whatever. Right. And I know for me personally, Mike, my lifts in the gym have always been the highest if I'm at my top speed and plyometric ability. Like if I can hit the biggest drops, and that's how I'm wired too. And the more I just get into, and if I ignore those and get away with it from those, that definitely is a negative for my physiology. But you had talked on another podcast about like bone crushing strength. And I think, like yoke walks, I'd just love for you to expand on that and what that means in light of, what we're talking about, but also just in general training practice, isometrics and everything that goes with that.
Right. So let's start just the physiology of it, right? So it turns out the key to the sympathetic nervous system is not adrenaline. That's never been true. People have lost their adrenaline gland and they still have a sympathetic response regardless. So adrenaline also is too slow to create a sympathetic response. We think it's fast. It's not. It takes a while to be produced and stuff like that. The key to the sympathetic nervous system, turns out, is a hormone, a peptide called osteocalcin. And that's created by the bone. So the bones are the antennas of the body. They're not just holding things together. They're actually the antenna of the human body. That's why your hearing is based on bones and everything, because they can feel vibration and pressure. And those things allow them to communicate to the body what's happening outside. So they're actually antenna of their environment. And they turn out that osteocalcin is released under either vibration or pressure. So when I talk about bone crossing strength, I mean, like you put a yoke onto your shoulder and everything, and you feel it all the way into your femur and things like this. The massive hormonal response from your body, from your bones, is going to dictate how far your sympathetic system will go, how much of a fight you will have. So that means that whenever, going back to holding, if you hold something like farmer's walk and he wants to basically crush your hands because it's so heavy and you have to squeeze, you will have a much greater response from the hormonal levels alone if you do it at that bone crushing level than if you do it without feeling the contact on the feet, the hands, or on your back or stuff like that. So that's the interest of when I talked about the bone crushing strength, was the physiological levels of that thing, that peptide called osteocalcin, that decides so many things. Then you go into insulin release. It's there as well. Other hormone productions. It's the key of the sympathetic nervous system, which is the key of everything we talked about today, is in the osteocalcin, is in your bones. So training through the bones on a somatic level is what matters the most.
Oh man, that's so huge, because I think
Google osteocalcin, yeah. Guys at home, Google osteocalcin. That's a rabbit hole you want to get into. By the way, we've seen, because they tested that on mice, right? Pregnant mice, and they remove the osteocalcin from that mouse, let them have babies, and then introduce the osteocalcin during pregnancy. And the level of learning of the mice with osteocalcin was levels of higher than the mice without osteocalcin. It goes on so many levels. It's one of the most important things out there, and produced by the bone.
Yeah. It's kind of like the thought that's in my brain is almost experience the highest forces possible in as environmentally relevant way as possible. You know, like that just seems like even like loaded carries, like different ways to, I think it is funny because sometimes I hear people downplay loaded carries sometimes. And I'm just like, I don't know, just do it until fatigue. And there's something that you feel in that. I used to work moving. I used to
just either they haven't done it or they suck at it. That's what they don't do.
Yeah. I think too, there's something with grip that I'd be curious to ask you your thought on grip strength, like from a psychosomatic perspective and your experience there. Just because I find it's interesting to see, sometimes you'll see people who are somewhat strong in main lifts and then they go do grip and it's just like very low.
Yeah. And it affects, well, you go back to the grip links all the way to the higher myotomes and everything. So now you're going toward more the thoracic spine and everything. You don't even have to go psychosomatic. The danger on the body is tremendous. Like if you start to, like the mid-back is very strong. The thoracic spine is a more complex thing. And then the neck is there and everything. Like there's a lot of brakes built in around the thoracic spine, right? You leave something overhead, things starts to move, and you feel you're trapped, you're going to drop things really fast. There's a lot of braking systems in place. And that one goes to the hand entirely. So if your hand starts to open, there's a signal all this is giving up, you let go as a defense mechanism alone. So of course, it makes you shut down. So you have braking mechanisms in place. Thank goodness, otherwise we'll all be dead by now, right? But so you can't avoid certain physiological realities. Or again, you have the same thing for the feet. If you have weak feet, you're not sprinting fast.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing for the hand. If you have weak hand, you're not holding it. So the body will drop because it's dangerous for you. Or at least that's a signal it gets.
Yeah. I feel like
with a sling type of thing.
In a way too, it makes me wonder, like with what you said, with like the overhead and like the trap, is if people who have stronger grip almost can find more ways to compensate for longer, if they're doing like a long sprint or carry or something.
Just build a stronger back. If you can do more pull-ups, you can hang longer, you can pull more, you do it more often because you're good at it. And and then 10 years later, your back is stronger. Like, not everything is in the second. Certain things require 5 years, 8 years, like jiu-jitsu, 8 to 10 years to be good, to be really good, black belt level, good. It's 10 years. Why? Because it's 1,000 hours of the foot and the hip, and you have to be able to move a certain way and feel the timing, and that's just hours upon hours upon hours. And if, for example, you're not a naturally born grappler or it's not your thing,
Mm-hmm.
like you don't, like you don't paying attention. You don't have that, ooh, I like this. Like you don't have that feel for it. People get good at it because they had a feel for it. And then after that, it's thousands of hours doing it. So if you have a strong grip, you pull more.
Yeah.
It feels better. So you're doing it more. So then you have a stronger back.
Yeah.
And because you have a stronger back and you did it more, you spend more time practicing. You have more experience. You have better skill. Yes, you can compensate better, but that's because your skill is higher because you did it more with the feel of it on top of it because you're naturally good at it. That matters.
Yeah.
That matters because you like it, because you're good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that makes you do it. Early, like your son started going, like your daughter is going to take a lot longer to do holds because she's like, I don't like it anyway. Yeah, because you suck at it. But if you were good at it, you would like it. Then you would do it often and you get better at it much faster than someone who doesn't like it because you just spend more time doing it on top of being more talented at it. The realization is going to happen faster and you're going to do it more often. So that's how you develop skill.
Yeah.
Some of that shit takes time. It takes years. Sprinting, a strong foot, 5 years, you tell me.
Yeah. It's kind of like an upward spiral. You're good at it and it just starts compounding itself over time, but it takes a while. It's not. Yeah.
You run correctly everywhere and you don't wear shoes because you don't like the way it feels. Whereas me, like flat feet, weak feet, always on the shoes, didn't sprint much or sprint, but incorrectly, didn't sprint, and then it spirals down or up. Choose one.
Yeah.
There's that. A strong grip will lead you to a strong back because you're just going to do it more.
Yeah. I totally agree with those. And it's interesting to see what athletes become based on that. Yeah.
You see what I mean? Not everything is a conscious thought. Sometimes it's just doing the stuff.
Yeah. And it feels good. And you just naturally like, yeah, I like this. Yeah.
Better.
Yeah. I totally agree. Real quick. So I got, I do want to get this. I kind of cutting down, the phylogenetic wheel was the thing that I saw that video so fascinating. I know it fits into all this, but I only have about 5 minutes. So I know we don't have time. Maybe we could save that for another podcast. I would love that. But I know you said something about sympathetic, parasympathetic. Maybe we can just touch on this. I've heard coaches say, oh, you should always be in a parasympathetic or slight parasympathetic, or how does all that fit in on the fight or flight versus that rest and digest state and what athletes are in? Yeah.
They mistake. Both sides are mistaken. It's how well you go from one to the other. That's the only thing that matters. Resilience is 7 times down, 8 times up. It's not falling less. It's getting back up more. Yeah. What is interesting with the nervous system is the capacity to go from parasympathetic to sympathetic and vice versa. That's the only thing that matters. You're in a fight. You're in boxing, right? The guy leaves you an opening and you just jump for it. Guess what? You fell into a trap, you get knocked out. So that means that in a fight, you have to be able to be very aggressive on one side, sympathetic. Guy is trying to kill me. I have all that reaction and the blood is going to my muscles and I'm ready to go. But at the same time, I have to be able on a dime to go, ooh, that was a trap. So you have to be able to go fight, freeze, fight, freeze. So sympathetic, parasympathetic, sympathetic, parasympathetic on a dime. We're talking milliseconds. And then go right back to punch and then come back. So that's the back and forth that matters. No, I don't want to be purely parasympathetic during a fight because you can namaste the bell way. But I don't want to be sympathetic because then I'm going to fall into every single trap. It's not slightly parasympathetic. It's not slightly sympathetic. It's your capacity to go from one side to the other. And so the balance will be either there or there or there because the more you're in sympathetic, the more your coordination goes away. So that's a problem. But the more you're in parasympathetic, the less your aggression goes away. So obviously, if you play darts, it's not quite the same as if you're boxing. Right. But doesn't matter. If you don't know the sympathetic, you play darts, when you're in front of people, you're going to freak out. You're going to stay in sympathetic. You cannot come back in parasympathetic. If you're only in a namaste stuff and you don't feel the pressure of the competition, you will not do well because you need the tension. Yeah. So the only thing that matters is handling the tension. And for that, you need both sides, not one side, both sides. Everything is about resilience. And resilience is the capacity to go from one side to the other and back. Yeah. That's what matters. You have to learn to go parasympathetic and sympathetic and come back wherever you need to be. You have to deal with your environment. Your environment goes from a 12 to a 6 to a 2, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Your capacity to handle those changes is what resilience is.
Yeah.
Sometimes life gives you a 6. I don't want you to answer with a 2. I don't want you to answer with a 12. I want a 6. But sometimes life gives you a 10. I don't want a 6 then. I want a 10. If he gives me a 2, I want a 2.
Yeah. That's the beauty of
So
that too.
the people that tell you, real fast, the people that tell you slightly parasympathetic answer everything with a 6. Well, I got news for you. When the bear is coming away, I can't give a 6. So the problem is their environment is always a 6 at most. So they think the best response is a 6. Yeah, but once you start to do jiu-jitsu, trust me, the first few years, it's not a 6.
Yeah, that value of the martial arts and the combat too. It's that would lead really well to like a phylogenetic wheel, like, right, going through the states. Like, how do you go through the states and how do you navigate that social emotional like piece of the workout? That's what coaching is. It's not just this is the sets and reps. It's so, I'd love to, I'm excited to chat more with you about that. Whenever we can get the chance for it, I know it'd be really fascinating.
But the point of the wheel is don't be stuck in a state.
Yeah.
So that's what I disagree with them. They say we want to be there. No, we don't. We do not want to be anywhere. We want to be where it's needed.
Yeah.
Freeze is a valid defense system when you're on your knees and the Nazis are coming to shoot everybody in the head and you play dead. Yeah. It's a very valid defense mechanism because I don't know where else it's going to work.
Yeah.
But when the bear is coming, I can't namaste it away. I can't go in freeze because I'm going to die. So I need to take off running. So I need every single hormone in my body to make me run really fast and forget the pain so I can try to get away. And then there's everything between those two.
Yeah.
I need you to be where you need to be based on your environment. Do not get stuck in a state that is mistaken. You don't know which state you're supposed to be in. Your environment will decide, not you. You can't namaste the bear away. That's not true.
Yeah.
I mean, you can. But,
maybe if you're like really, 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 really top tier advanced, then maybe, I don't know, but probably not.
What happens when the bear shows up?
Yeah.
But the bear, I mean, something that is stronger than you that you cannot.
Exactly.
You're going to have to have specific. Okay, the car is coming at you. The driver that you see is coming at you full bore. You're going to namaste that, or you're going to have a panic attack feeling that gives you all the energy necessary to jump out of the way.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I think this is, to me, that's always the hardest part too, because when you're in those situations and it's not going your way, how do you, the skill and art of finding the shift, it's not as easy as, it's not easy. Exactly.
No, it's very hard.
Yeah.
That's what you train to go that way and then don't come back. That way, come back. That way, come back. This is the work we do with PTSD. They go so far in the sympathetic. The point is not to say, don't go there. They're going to go there.
Yeah.
They stole shit. They went through stuff. So they're going to go there. That's not the question. The question is, let's stop the symptom and let's just allow you to, when you go there, come back.
Yeah.
That's the problem. People with panic attack, what they tell you is, I have no control over it. The first thing you do is you show them that there is a way to control it. The panic attack is still going to happen. It's still going to hurt. But maybe not to 12. If I can just make you go 9 instead of 12, what is manageable? 8.5. Well, let's get you to 8.5. But guess what? You're going to go to 8.5 because you will have the panic attack. That's not the point. The point is when let's get to a place where you don't jump off the bridge.
Yeah.
But it's like anxious people. They will always be anxious. You will never stop it, ever. The only question is, can you make it work for you or is it going to work against you? That's all. So it's resilience. It's frustration. Let's accept the frustration. Let's use it. Let's not lower it. Let's not run away from an environment.
Yeah.
That's the secret. And that's the will, is where are you in your environment? And no, you don't get to choose.
Yeah, it's part of the beauty of life for sure. But hey, I wish I hadn't run out of time. But that would be it. Yeah, next time we'll pick up right there. I will make some notes. Love it. Thank you so much, Julien. Yeah, thank you so much. It was wonderful talking to you today. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Always.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode. I appreciate you being here, and I'll see you next week.